Before he gets going, just a reminder, it's university policy through January 21st that in class you have to wear a mask. So if you do not have one, we have some spare ones that Connor is carrying around right now. But that is through January 31st, so please do prepare, and here is Clay.
Hello?
Should be on.
And now, sweet, all right. Can everyone hear me all right? Can I get a thumbs up from the back? Sweet. Well, thanks everybody. I'll try to be really quick. I just need two little things from everybody in here. So if you want to just go ahead and pull out your phone. So pull out your phone. I'll have you scan this QR code in a second, but just go ahead and pull that out. And while you're doing that, who in here is a freshman or a sophomore? Cool. So yeah, most of you guys. Cool, yeah, you guys are actually going to want to fill this out. And well, my name is Clay Dell, and I'm obviously not your professor, but what I am, I'm a recent grad, and now I get to work with students here at OU through an organization called Southwestern Advantage. And what we do, we sponsor a paid summer internship program for OU students. It's mostly centered around leadership and communication, but it is open to all majors. The program is pretty competitive though, because the average intern we worked with last summer at OU earned around 10 grand and got the chance to pick up some college credit. I think the best part though is just the experience students can kind of pick up for their resume though. And if you haven't already, go ahead and pull out your phone. I'll have you scan this code really quick. Even if you already have plans for the summer, this form just takes a couple of seconds. And once you get that pulled up, it should say Southwestern Advantage at the top in orange letters. Are you guys seeing that? Does anyone have any trouble pulling it up? Cool, I'll let you answer those first couple questions. They're just some multiple choice questions like, what did you do last summer? Did you work? Did you take classes? Do something else? And if you've got the same plans for this summer, I'll let you fill those in. Under that, the first blank should ask for an opportunity code. That code's on the board, but it's Clay 712. C-L-A-Y 712. And once you get that typed in, the rest of the form just takes a couple of seconds. When you get to the bottom, just make sure you hit submit and you're good to go. Once you've done that, you'll basically just receive a call later this semester from one of our campus leaders. We'll tell you a little bit more about the program and how to apply. Other than that, we look forward to meeting a lot of you guys this semester. If you could just get those submitted before class starts, that would be awesome. And yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks, Clay. Really appreciate it. So we'll do that throughout the semester. There'll be opportunities like that, internships, anything like that. We do need one mask over here, Connor, it looks like. But throughout the semester, you know, we'll give you some opportunities for jobs and stuff like that. And maybe another mask over here, it looks like too. Okay. So one here and one there on the left. All right. So let me close that out. This is us. Democracy. Yes? I didn't say good. That's it. Okay, let's talk a little bit. You guys, for today, you read the Declaration of Independence and you read Letter from Birmingham Jail. And so we're going to come back to Letter from Birmingham Jail later. All right, Connor, do you have another mask? We need one right over here, I think. Oh, and here too. Thanks, Dennis. I appreciate it. So you guys read this for today, and so I'm going to ask you a couple questions. John Locke, Adam Smith, Thomas Paine, these are who people are reading at the right there in the back, and then this gentleman over here to the far left. Oh. Can you raise your hand because he couldn't see you, I don't think. And then she has her hand raised right there. Thanks. John Locke, Adam Smith, and Thomas Paine. Who can tell me who John Locke is? Yes.
I guess a philosopher is the right word for it. And he was about
Good. He's a philosopher who wrote about natural rights. He wrote about how government should be and what we should expect, that sort of stuff. Adam Smith. Who's Adam Smith? Yeah.
He was an economist. He was big on
economist, big on free trade, essentially he said this. He said, hey, look, all nations of the world would be wealthy if they were allowed to do what they wanted to do and trade freely and not be clamped down by these European countries that are controlling all the trade and these companies that are controlling the trade, but there should be free trade between. Again, you have to wear a mask. If you don't wear a mask, I have to ask you to leave class, okay? Thank you. So, that's Adam Smith. What about Thomas Paine? Thomas Paine? Yeah. Yes? Thomas Paine? Yeah.
He wrote the comic sense pamphlet that went around the American Revolution.
Okay, he wrote the Common Sense pamphlet that went around at the time of the American Revolution. And it said some kind of key things, right? He said, it is common sense that an island cannot rule a continent. It is common sense that you can't get justice if you have to go on a sea voyage to get it. It's common sense that you can't be taxed and be considered citizens if you don't have any say in your representation and in your taxation. This pamphlet sold 1 million copies on the American continent alone. This is significant because there are only 3 million people here. And that sale of 1 million pamphlets, it funded George Washington's Revolutionary Army. Okay? So it was a key part of the revolution. So why did we end up with democracy anyway? Well, we have kind of this philosophical journey. We start with Aristotle, who certainly did not trust democracy, right? He thought the masses did not have the ability to rule. He thought that certainly there were those of discernment, right, who could use logic to determine what's right, okay? And that's an important idea, because think about that. At the time, if a swan landed on one temple as opposed to a different temple, then that god's pronouncements coming from those priests were the ones that government was following. If lightning struck or there was an eclipse, then depending on who had the voice of the king at the time, those priests determined what that meant in terms of how we relate to one another. If there's a trial going on and an owl hoots, then you must be guilty. That seems bad, right? And so Aristotle says something important. He says, hey, look, we don't have to look to gods and goddesses. As humans, we can use logic to figure out what's right. During the Enlightenment, we see an expansion of this. Martin Luther, what does Martin Luther do? Protestant Reformation, right? He basically pounds an edict into the door of his church that says simply this: people can talk to God and figure out what God has to say themselves. They don't need priests to do it. And during the Enlightenment, people said, well, if I can talk to God, then God doesn't say who the king is, or the mayor, or the duke. We can figure out how to govern ourselves. If we talk to God, we can figure out how to govern ourselves. Right? Then Hobbes, writing for the king, so take it with a grain of salt, talks about something important, a social contract. Anybody know what a social contract is? Yes?
It's kind of like an implied consent for your being born into a certain nation that you gain the rights that have to submit to certain rules of that.
Okay. Implied consent, submitting to the rules of the nation. As citizens, we have a deal, right? And he says, and this goes back, right? He goes, and we don't even necessarily remember making this deal, right? Do you guys remember making a deal? You're like 2, they ask you to sign. No? Right. So He says this goes back, we don't remember this, but way back when, kings made a deal, and their deal was, we keep you safe, you follow our rules. Social contract, right? We keep you safe, you follow our rules. Locke says, yeah, but. Locke says, I think there is a social contract, but there's more to it than that. It also requires things like justice. It requires something else, and he says, hey, look, if there is such a thing as natural law, that we can figure out what's right using logic, then there's such thing as natural rights, which means that there are things that are inalienable. What does inalienable mean? Inseparable. Inalienable from being human. Part of being human means that I have the right to life and liberty and property, says Locke. So let's talk about the Declaration of Independence. And I'll tell you, this is kind of messed up, so I'm just going to skip the next slide, all right? Because I couldn't get it clear. Okay? But I want you to tell me, when you read the Declaration of Independence, what are some of the things that stood out to you? The Declaration of Independence is essentially a Dear John letter to the king, right? But it's on Facebook. Dear King, we're over, and I'm posting this so that all of our friends can see that it's totally not my fault. It was you. These are the things that you did to me. All right? And it's a list of grievances. We didn't have representation. You stopped us in the street for no reason. We were abused. We were beaten. We didn't give justice. All those taxes that we didn't agree to. It's a breakup letter. But in that breakup letter, Thomas Jefferson says some pretty radical things. It's a letter of rebellion. We're splitting, we're gone, we're out of here. Everybody who signed it committed treason when they did it. And in this, Jefferson says, we hold these truths self-evident. He said, well, duh, all men are created equal. 1776. Did people believe that all men were created equal? No, they didn't. Did Thomas Jefferson believe it? Maybe he wanted to. He really wanted to. Did the people who signed this, did they believe it? They wanted to. But he said something radical. All men are created equal. And he goes on to say things like, government has certain duties. They have to provide justice. They have to give us life, protect life, or protect our liberty, and protect our pursuit of happiness. So he diverges a little bit from Locke here. What's happiness mean in 1776? Not exactly. Huh? Not exactly. I'll give you a hint, it's a Nike commercial. Being all you can be. Fulfillment. I always ask this question, it's a multiple choice question on the very first exam, just so you know.
It will be there.
But happiness is fulfillment. Government has a duty to provide a place where we can be all we can be. That's radical. That's radical. So I can have you guys do this if you want to. What struck me most in the Declaration of Independence. But you have to go to the internet to do it, so we'll wait on that one, okay? But let's talk about this. We go from Locke. The idea that government is based on the consent of the governed. This is the modern basis for what a republic is. This idea that we consent to be a part of this society. Okay? The consent of the governed. Locke is going to add in those protection of equal liberties. Life, liberty, and property, says Locke. Madison, incidentally, would say, hey, property is more than happiness. Jefferson. He really kind of slimmed this down. But Jefferson says, yeah, happiness is different than property. To which Madison says, okay. Now Madison's going to say, property is not just, this is mine and I own it. My hat is mine, that piece of land is mine. It's my work. It's my talent. It's my ambition. All of that is my property. And that needs to be protected. Okay? Whereas Jefferson's going to say, yeah, but I think government needs to do something else. Government needs to provide us a place where we can live up to our potential, where we can be fulfilled. Now, does government have to guarantee that? Jefferson would say no. Just has to give us the opportunity. He also says this. He says, if government is unjust, then it's not just our right to revolt, it's our duty. Jefferson thought that there would be another, revolution in about another 20, 30 years. Jefferson, in the original draft of the Declaration of Independence, put in there that slavery was an abomination and needed to be ended. That was taken out. That certainly didn't end up in the Constitution. We'll talk about that. But the Declaration is about rebellion, optimistic, this idea that we're all in it together, right? That we have solidarity, that we're equals. And a lot of those original state constitutions that are created reflect this in their constitution, these principles. When we do have a revolution, it's a civil war, 90 years later. A lot of times when we talk about justice, we get really frustrated. How many of you have ever been frustrated about what you think, how long it takes to get justice? Anyone? A few here and there. It's frustrating. 90 years. It took a war to do what the majority of the framers of the Constitution, the majority of the founding fathers believed and abolished slavery. Of course, that resulted in equality for everybody immediately, right? That's what happened? Oh no. We did it again, right? During the Civil War, Lincoln's going to refer to the Declaration of Independence, not to the Constitution. He's going to say, all men are created equal is the standard maxim of free society. And Jefferson had the coolness, forecasting capacity to introduce into a merely revolutionary document this abstract truth, applicable to all men and all times, and so to embalm it there, that today we can read it And we can remember it, and we can use it as a stumbling block to tyranny. Because words have power. Whether Jefferson 100% believed it or not, words have power. At the same time, in 1848, so a little bit before the Civil War, we have the Seneca Falls Declaration. And we have Elizabeth Cady Stanton writing that. She basically uses the Declaration of Independence and points out, hey, all this stuff you said about kings oppressing man, same thing about man oppressing woman for all time. She also pointed out, and the reason for this is because women were the backbone of the abolitionist movement. And so they would travel from place to place, but if they weren't traveling with a man, then they weren't allowed. They couldn't check into hotels or places they couldn't go because they were women. Right? She said, we're not so free ourselves. In 1917, the struggle for suffrage, women's right to vote, with Carrie Chapman Catt saying, ours is a nation born of revolution, of rebellion against a system of government so securely entrenched in the customs and traditions of human society that in 1776 it seemed impregnable. Think about that. This completely turns every system of government on its head. From the beginning of things, nations have been ruled by kings and for kings while the people served and paid the cost. Governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. And as Carrie Chapman Catt points out, by the way, we're 50% of this. So shouldn't we be consenting too? That equality that didn't come to be following the Civil War or women's suffrage movement. Because 90 years, 30 years, 60 years, 100 years. Dr. Martin Luther King, in his I Have a Dream speech, says, I say to you today, my friends, even though we face difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. And it is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed, because understand this was our creed, and this is our creed. We hold these truths self-evident that all men are created equal. He's saying, hey, knock, knock, remember? You say it every day. Make it true. So, letter from Birmingham jail. We'll let you guys, I think you can respond to this. You can text Dr. Rowell at 306 to 22323 and tell me what stood out to you from letter from Birmingham jail.
What were steps?
You will probably learn. Oh, I'm going to take roll while we're doing that too. How's that? So once you've done that, or if you choose not to do that, then go to the Cengage app. When you open up Cengage, there's these little 3 lines here in the top. And remember, just as a reminder, the Cengage app, you can go to your Play Store. It's a blue circle with a little white, like a stylized star or a stylized flower. This is how we take roll in this class. And also there'll be polls that we take here too. Yeah. You can't. The only way to do the Cengage is this way. Okay, you may uninstall and reinstall it. If you've already done that, then send me an email and I'll send it. For those of you who do have it open up, okay, go to that little thing in courses, and I'm clicking on it, and across the top, whenever I click on my course, it's gonna have this banner and activities, attendance. So I'm gonna click attendance, you're gonna click attendance, I'm gonna take attendance. Okay? You have 2 minutes, you taking attendance? Today's a dry run. Just see if you can do it. All right. It's a letter from Birmingham Jail. Morals, passion, peace, courage, inspiration, desire, passionate, resilience, unjust laws, pain, reason, nonviolent. Let's talk about a couple of these. Let's talk about unjust laws. Yes. Your login will work with the Cengage? It should be the same one that you log in to the account with, so the same one your email from OU. You may have to uninstall and reinstall it. Today is a dry run, so you're okay. What's the difference between just and unjust laws? What's the difference between just and unjust laws? According to Dr. King. Just and unjust laws. Yeah.
Just laws would apply the same to everyone, favor one person to the other, unjust laws.
Okay, perfect. Just laws apply the same to everyone. Unjust laws gives an advantage to a group or to a person, or treats a group or a person differently. Unjust laws are going to be applied equally. What does he say about unjust laws? What should be done? We talked a little bit. Nonviolence is up there. Why does he advocate nonviolence? Because Thomas Jefferson wouldn't, right? Thomas Jefferson said that the tree of liberty is bathed in the blood of tyrants and patriots. So, Dr. King advocates nonviolence, like Henry David Thoreau, and Alice Paul, and Mahatma Gandhi. But why? What does he say? Why nonviolence? Do you know? Why nonviolence? I know you guys read it. Some of you. Yeah.
Darkness cannot live out darkness, and light cannot live out it's kind of about like being a bigger person, who's a very devout their beliefs are that strict, and one of those rules in the Bible is that you cannot react in a violent way or in a peaceful way.
Okay, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Hate cannot drive out hatred. He also says we have to be as pure as we want our ends to be. Right? And as pointed out, he's a very devout person. Right? And he believes that the way to make change is to be the change. Right, Karen? Mary and Death of Montgomery, which we'll talk about in a couple of weeks. He says some other important things. A nonviolent, we're going to talk about those steps to a nonviolent campaign. We're also going to talk about a few things he says in here, but one of them that always sticks with me is he talks about his daughter. How many of you guys have ever been around toddlers? Right? The thing about toddlers is that the whole world is amazing when they're not angry at it, right? Okay? But they're open, right? Like, my 2-year-old may have been very angry with me, But the next time I see her, her eyes light up and her arms are out. And he said, I'm looking at my little perfect daughter and she's getting twisted. She's starting to have unconscious hatred toward white people because they're awful to her. And it's not right that you're twisting my daughter. It's not right that you are hurting her mind. It's personal. Personal. Time of the Revolution, Abigail Adams was a little concerned. She, like James Madison, said, yeah, all this stuff about rebellion and equality, freedom, yay, good. Who's in charge? Abigail Adams said. Who's going to decide what the laws are? Who's going to put energy into this? How are we going to make sure it's fair? We have to have a system of laws to make this work. James Madison was spending some time in the Virginia House of Burgesses, and Patrick Henry was, a great orator. He was smooth. People would pass laws that he wanted, and guess who benefited from those laws? Patrick Henry, and nobody else. James Madison says, hey, look, the thing is people are self-interested. And if you don't think that's true, if you think we're all in it together to make this a better place, wake up. I think civic duty is important, and we should encourage that. Hey, this whole class is about doing that. But also understand that people are driven by self-interest. And self-interest is not always pure. Declaration of Independence is poetry. It really is. And with the exception of the preamble, which we'll listen to in class on Wednesday, the Constitution is not. It's Congress has these powers. The President has these powers. This is what the courts can do. These are overall the powers and restrictions on this government. It doesn't say anything like equality, freedom, and liberty. As a matter of fact, those three words are not in there. So we get to the Equal Protection Clause. It's still not equality. A republic means that the law rules. This is significant. All governments see a republic or claim to be a republic, have a system of laws, but here's what makes it real. That everyone is equal in the eyes of the law. Whether you're a president, a billionaire, whether you're homeless, a police officer, it's going to oppose the idea of the divine right of kings. Justice, equality, liberty, and solidarity. The rule of law has to be above the tides of public sentiment. Why? If the majority of us want something and it's outside the law, why shouldn't we go forward with that? The tyranny of the majority against the minority, which you guys are going to read in Federalist 10, right, for Wednesday. Because the majority isn't always right. And, if it's in their interest to oppress people so that they get more, they will. And because we're passionate, we're not just logical. Sometimes we get really upset about things. And we react in that way. All persons, majority, minority, rich, poor, must follow the rule of law and the policies of the majority that are lawful. In other words, are created under the Constitution. So, I have a poll for you. So, those of you who tried to make your thing work and it wasn't working, let's see if we can make it work for the polls. Okay? Again, still a dry run. Look at 152 of you. It wasn't bad. Okay, that poll is activated. What do you think is most important to make it democratic for public work? What do you think is most important to make it democratic for public work? While you guys are answering that, I sent you instructions on how to do the homework. If for some reason, you just got missed class or you had some other problem, please send me an email after class and say, hey, could I maybe have an extra hour or two? And for this class, for this first week, I am happy to do that. So remember your homework is due before class, yeah. Is it pulled up? Yeah, it should be on your Cengage app and across the top. Cengage app and across the top, there is a banner. It says attendance and polls, grade, roster. There's still a whole minute left on that. And I've got 148 of you. So get in there. Still a whole minute left on that. Yeah. You said again? You have to do it on your phone. Yes. Again, it's a dry run, so if it doesn't work, you may want to uninstall or reinstall. But if you're still having issues with it, send me an email and I'll have to see it. Eric's going to look at it. So your homework is due before class. It's always due before class. Okay? That's because I want you to read before class. In the modules, I have any extra reading that's there for this week. So I had Letter from Birmingham Jail, I had the Declaration of Independence. I have a link to the Federalist Papers. You do not have to read all the Federalist Papers. It's just so you know that I didn't make you read all of them. You just have to read 2, 10, and 51. And 1, I think, is down there too for later. The 10 and 51, and I have not only did I put those in there, but I put a summary and analysis so you can get kind of an idea of what it's about. And we'll talk about that on Wednesday. Other than that, questions? All right, until Wednesday, over! So here, I'll tell you what your results are. 44% say freedoms of belief, speech, press, association, access to government. 28% rule of law, 22% equality, and 6% participatory electorate.